All right, here we are. We're gonna go ahead and try a brisket for tonight. It's about 10 o'clock at night. We're gonna go ahead and start with a large 20-pound whole brisket. First thing we need to do is go ahead and cut off a bunch of the fat from the top, and then we're gonna get it all seasoned up. I'm just gonna kind of skip to it, but I'm chunking off some of the large pieces. Get it all seasoned while the grill preheats. Want to get that good smoke going while we're doing our work here, just kind of saving time. But then we'll start and put that on, probably let it go for about another 4 to 6 hours, and we'll go ahead and check it. So we'll check back after I trim it up and start getting the seasoning. All right, so we've got a lot of the fat trimmed off here, and you can actually see the direction of the grains, and that's really important when you're doing a brisket because you actually want to cut opposite end. So in just a little bit, I'm going to cut just a little bit of a corner off so that I can remember which way I want to actually slice this brisket when we're done, because after it's all charred, it's sometimes hard to see that, and it gets a little bit confusing when you're just kind of cutting through the meat, especially as it wants to crumble and pull apart. But you can see how much fat I actually cut off of this brisket. It's a pretty fatty one, so take that in consideration when you're buying a brisket, that you might cut off a few pounds of the meat, so depending on what you want. So this started about a 19 pound. I would guess that's probably about a 16-pound brisket now that it's all said and done. I keep it pretty simple with my seasonings. I'm gonna start with some salt, do a little Tony's, a little salt and peppers, and then a little Kroger mix that has some smokehouse sweet. It's got the little brown sugar and a few different seasonings already mixed into it. So I'm gonna go ahead and season this up, both sides, really season it up really well. And then also we're going to inject it because this is a pretty thick piece of meat. So we want to make sure some of those flavors really get into the thick parts of the meat as well. All right, so I've got it all patted down. I like to always finish it with like a steak seasoning, something that has some large peppercorn, something to give a good crust and good char on the end. And you can see that I sliced here to go ahead and mark. You can still see the grains of this going this way. So I sliced here. That'll help me when this is all done, because it's going to shrink up a little bit, not much, but just a little bit, and the char on the top will make it a little bit hard to see the grains. So now I'm ready to go ahead and do my injection, and this is just beef broth, some onion powder, garlic powder, and then some cumin. So I'm going to go ahead and inject this once every couple inches and then call it good. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've done injections. I just use a simple injector, and I go just every couple inches, trying to put it around. And so nothing special. One thing I didn't say is that I try not to put anything big like peppers in my injection because it'll clog up the needles pretty good. But so this is all injected. It should be good to go. You can put whatever you want in your injection. Some people put vinegar base, like an apple cider vinegar. Some people like putting apple juice. I don't like using apple juice because I find that sometimes it can burn the sugars in it. I just like using a little bit of beef broth, basically. I use the beef bouillon cubes because they're really salty. And this amount of meat, I'm not really afraid of over salting because it's so thick. And I think that I'm putting on too much salt in the first few that I made, just really didn't have very much flavor. So I'm okay with it being a little bit salty. And then letting that soak in, because a lot of that's going to drip out too as we cook tonight. So I'm about ready to go fire it up onto the grill. The grill's been preheating. Should be, hopefully when I go down there, sitting around 200, so we'll see where we're at. And I'm going to set this at 225, so let's get this on the grill. All right, perfect. It's actually better than I thought. We're sitting around 210. I want to cook this about 225 because I'm actually going to be doing my first overnight cook. I have the Pit Boss XL, so it's kind of a lower price point smoker. Had it for about a year. It does great. I'm going to have to obviously fill up the hopper a bit before I get this in here. But I'm going to go ahead and turn my dial up to 225 is where I want it to stay. I'm going to get these meat probes in. I like that this has 2 meat probes, so I can check different areas, one for the flat and one for the main part. Helps me keep track a little bit better as we go. So we're going to put this in, fire it up, make sure my grates are all clean. Should be nice to go, and then every couple hours I'll just kind of check on it a little bit, make sure I'm not overcooking, but basically I'm going to sleep through the night, and then hopefully I'll be ready to foil wrap this maybe early this morning. All right, here we go. All right, so it's been about an hour already. Just loaded up the hopper with some fresh pellets. I just like to use the Pit Boss Classic. I also like the Pit Boss Competition. blend. So our grill is staying at looks like it's sitting at about 220. Already the flat part's at 113, and the larger part of the brisket's at 71. Those should even out, it'll kind of level out a little bit, so don't worry about the one getting done a little bit faster than the other. So if we have a little peek, it's looking good. You really don't want to open the lid too much, letting all that good smoke out, so we're just going to shut that down. But your hopper's full, should be a good night. Come back in a few hours and check it and make sure that our temperature is doing all right. Alright, so it's about 4:30 in the morning. You can see that we're still hanging out about 200 degrees. You can see that I changed my temperature down to 200 instead of 225. I decided to do that. I'm glad I did that so it wouldn't cook too fast. We've got two different probes in there. So we're right about at that 160 area. 154 now, it's kind of floating back and forth, so it's probably actually got at least another half an hour before it's up to 160. I want to pull this and foil wrap it. Hopper's still nice and full, doing well through the overnight. So this has been on about 5.5 hours or so. It's looking good, looking real good. Some good color to it. Flat's cooking at a pretty good temp. The point's looking good. So I'm pretty excited about this. My first time doing a overnight with the pit boss. So yeah, I guess I'll just watch a little bit of news here and come back and check in about a half hour. Bring my foil with. Alright, it's 5 a.m. so this has been on about 6 hours or so. Still holding steady at 200. This thing does a great job of holding this temperature. You can see that the point is up to just about 160. The flat's still hanging on at 150. Now that's different. When we first started out, the flat temperature was coming up way faster than the point, but see how they balanced out. So don't panic if that happens to you. The point seems to be coming up too fast. It'll all be all right. Just relax. You're making some good food. Take a peek in there. Get some good caramelizing on the outside. Everything's looking really good. Looking forward to this. So what we're gonna do now, I've already got it set up. We have some foil, a little bit of broth. I'm maybe gonna put a little bit of this. I wouldn't use it much on anything else. Just the spray butter stuff. I'm gonna drizzle a little bit on top, and we'll see how that does to soak in a little bit of fat on top, keep it juicy as well. So we're gonna take the brisket off, plop it on there, double wrap it, put a little juice, and then we're gonna turn up the temperature for a bit. So we've got all foil wrapped. I put about a cup of beef broth in there to help it steam up. Everything's looking good. So the temperature was actually a little bit down. I took the probes out now so you can see that they don't really register anymore. I like to leave them out for a little bit because I don't want any steam to escape. It'll about 3 hours or so. I'll probably put one in just to kind of get a benchmark. But now we're going to turn the temperature up to that 225. Let it cook for again. Again, I'll probably come back in about 3 hours, give it a check. We'll see where we're at. We're shooting for around 204 is what we'll want to be when this is all done, but it's not going to be done for a while. Alright, as you can see, sun's up now. Here's a better look at the pellet grill. Temperature still holding steady where I set it last night, or I guess this morning. 225, 230. We're going to give our initial check to see what our temperature's at. I don't even come close to expecting this to be done. So I'm just going to be putting a probe in. My guess would be we should be maybe sitting around 180 inside. I like to put it into the point. Maybe it off to the side. That went in pretty smooth, but there's some resistance. Close it up. See, we're climbing. 65. You want that to be able to go in and it should be super smooth, just like butter, or actually a little bit warmer than I thought. That climbed it for just 5 hours. So we're getting close. I'd say maybe another hour or two. That'd make it about a 12-hour smoke on this. So we'll check it again here soon as it's still climbing. This thing's reading that it's actually pretty hot. I went ahead and tested a little bit more. Go by the feel, that goes in there real smooth. There's not really a lot of resistance at all. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this because I don't want to overcook it, but we're reading around 208 and sometimes 210. Sometimes these probes can be a little bit off. They're not extremely accurate. They give you a good guide, so you got to be able to figure it out when you're done a bit. I also don't want to poke too many holes in this, let all the steam out. So I'm going to pull this off, put a towel over it, put it in a cooler, and then let it set for a couple hours, and then it should be about perfect time to cut it. So you put it into the cooler. I like to do that just so it kind of steams. When you have something this big, a good cooler works. Otherwise, just putting a towel or two over it. Let it rest for at least an hour. Let those juices settle back down. You can see some of them are starting to leak out the foil after I lifted it. So it's a good sign that there's a lot of juice left in there. So excited to see this. This is the waiting part again. It'd be nice to just cut into it and dig in and see what you got, but you have to be patient, so let it rest. All right, now it's time for my favorite part, the reveal. I've taken it out of the cooler. I like to put it into some of these big sheet pans here, the aluminum ones. Now I use two of them, one to hold all the juice as I cut it, and then to put it into for serving. And then I like to transfer some of that juice, but I don't want it to waste on a cutting board. It's way too much juice. As you can see, it cooked down, so moist, feels super tender. This should be a good cut. So go ahead and grab a knife. Here's my cut angle. This is just falling apart. It's not even cutting in a slice. This is so good. Grab a schnibble of that here. Look at that. Some good ring on it. It's nice and tender, juicy. This is a great cook. I'm very excited to eat this. This should be perfect. So that's one of my first times doing an overnight cook. A few things that went a little bit different, but overall this looks like a great success. I mean, that is perfect tender brisket. All right, so got it all carved up. You can see how much that 18 pounder, maybe about 16 pounds after I trimmed off all the fat. Kind of have more of the flat side over here. It's a little more lean. Over here is more of the point. It's got a little higher fatty content, but all of it is perfect, tender, peel apart, looks delicious. I'm gonna save some of this juice now. I'm just gonna put it over it. When I'm ready to serve this today, I'll just put it in the oven with a little tin foil, let it come back up to temp, and it almost kind of re-steams it, but gets some of that good flavor. All the mix and everything's all in there. So I like to drizzle it over that and save some of that flavor. So that's it, made a brisket.